In this episode of the Military Mindset for Business podcast, I'm talking with Zach Plath. Now, I'm going to unpack Zach's journey from why he joined the infantry, spending time at 89 RAR, and why he's established VetComp and how through his lived experience, he's still out there representing the veteran community, particularly in this really important space of DVA advocacy. So stay tuned. Zach Plath from VetComp. G'day, everybody. My name's Pete Liston, and on this episode of the Military Mindset for Business podcast, I'm talking to Zach Plath, former 89 infantry guy who founded a company called VetComp. And how are you today, Zach?
I'm doing well, Pete. Thanks for having me on, and I'm looking forward to the chat.
Mate, it's a pleasure. So it's good to have you on the podcast for the veteran business community. So we always like to kick this thing off nice and simple, mate. Where did you grow up?
Mate, fortunately enough, I grew up in Brisbane. And the reason I say that's fortunate enough for myself, I was fortunate enough to get posted to 89 RAR. So I grew up North Brisbane, South Brisbane, floated around between the two. And one of the reasons which I wanted to join the army as well was my dad. He was actually posted to 6 RAR. So that kind of kept us in Brisbane as well, yeah.
Yeah, what years was he in 6 RAR?
Oh, off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to recall, but I do remember that he discharged when I enlisted. So I don't know if that was deliberate or...
Right. So he was actually in as you were growing up?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
All right. Did he spend his whole career in Brisbane as well?
Yeah, so he spent most of it in Brisbane. They tried to post him to Singleton as an instructor, promote to Sarge. He didn't want to proceed with that. He did a trip to Timor and to Afghan. And then pretty much when I enlisted, that's actually when he separated from defense.
What year did you enlist?
I enlisted in 2018. So I did about a year and a half out of high school of just working odd jobs. I was waiting to enlist. At that time, there was a tremendous backlog to enlist for whatever reason. Yeah. So it took me about a year and a half to get in.
Mate, I want to talk more about you, but just while we're on the topic of your dad, did he do the big 6 RAR trip?
I don't believe so. No, not the big one.
Yeah, gotcha. Mate, well, grunt life, what was it like? Was it just a natural path of the course that, following in dad's footsteps to go into the infantry?
Yeah, that was certainly a factor which played a part. In addition to that, young, dumb, full of testosterone, certainly wanted to challenge myself. And I thought, let's give infantry a crack. I went ahead and did it, went through the training. That was all fun. And then fortunately enough, got the posting which I wanted, which was 89. In terms of the role itself, fantastic. Like, I love getting paid to work out, being around mates, that camaraderie, things of that nature was always fantastic. Reason for my separation and what kind of led to my discharge, I did my ROSO, I did my 4 and a bit years, and I wanted the agency back in my own life. Obviously, working with veterans now, I get to speak to veterans every day. And one of the common themes I see is the loss of identity, but in addition to that, the loss of structure. I'm probably of a contrarian opinion in the sense that I didn't quite frankly appreciate the structure of military life, right? So I enjoyed having my own agency, being able to make my own decisions. So that's ultimately which led to my separation. And frankly, at the time, there weren't any operations. There was a lot of peacetime. I did do a deployment, if you want to call it that, to RCB. But other than that, it was relatively quiet.
Man, if I had my time again, I would have. So I joined up a little bit later and went through RMC and joined Ramey. But if I had my time again, I would have joined up at 18 years old as a grunt and just got into it, man. Like, there's got to be no pure soldering experience and just hanging with the lads, doing breezeway time and run, down, crawl, observe, aim, fire, mate. Anyway. Let's mate. Butterworth, I just spent a week in Thailand last week, which is only probably a couple of 100 Ks as the crow flies from RCB or from was it RAF base Butterworth? Is that
Butterworth?
Right?
Yes.
Butterworth. What did you do? 3 months over there?
Yeah, it was about a 3-month stint. The group who went prior to us, I think they got up to all sorts of mischief because our group wasn't allowed any leave. So
no, you're kidding me. So no Georgetown, no Penang.
No. We did get an odd day or two, but it was always returned back to barracks by 1800 or whatever it might have been. Yeah, I think the last group got up to a lot of mischief.
Surely RCB's been going for, I think, 50 years, man. Surely there's mischief every other trip over there. You get a bunch of lads getting over there,
Yeah.
and mate.
Yeah, there was still blokes jumping the fences and going out when they shouldn't. But look, at that time, I was fresh to the battalion, so I was on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, mate, you wouldn't be a digger if you're not getting up to a little bit of trouble. But so what kind of things do you do on an RCB?
Yeah, look, so from my experience, there was a considerable amount of field, a lot out in the jungle.
Yep.
A week out in the jungle kind of feels like 2 weeks sometimes.
Yeah.
The instructors who are posted there, they've been there for a very long time. So there's some discrepancies in sort of a training we were getting back home, and then we were coming over to Butterworth and just trying to iron out those creases. That was a little bit of a challenge.
Yep.
Definitely challenging out in the field environment just due to the terrain, but ultimately it was a great experience. We got to travel, so we did actually a bit of time in Thailand as well. So we got to work with the Thai Army, which was rewarding.
Nice. When you mentioned instructors, are they Malaysian instructors or Aussie instructors?
So Aussie instructors for the most part on Butterworth, but
right.
a lot of them have been there for over a decade.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there was some discrepancies in sort of the way sort of drills and things like that were conducted.
Yep. And what about, do you do like Tully or Kanungra or anything like that before you go over, or is this your first jungle shot?
This was my first shot at the jungle. So yeah, straight into it. It was great fun, honestly. Definitely, I would have been 18, 19 at the time. Fantastic experience. It's an experience you're not going to get anywhere else. So a lot of people who I come across, who are graduating high school and things like that, yep. If they're unsure about what they want to do, or if they're apprehensive to jump into study and commit to a 4-year degree, I say give a crack at the army or give a crack at defense, right? Have a gap year and give it a go.
Yeah, man, I think that's unreal. Like I said, I joined a bit later, and I was just doing dumb stuff and wasting time until for years and years. And I just wish I'd jumped in earlier and had a crack. I was also a little bit lucky though, because when I got into the military, it was very active. There was Solomon's, Timor, Afghan, Iraq. There was, and plus all the United Nation gigs. So I almost feel, well, not sorry. It's just the way it is. But it's tough for people who come into the military at the moment and just don't get those operational opportunities. But at the same time, that's a good thing that people aren't being put in harm's way. So, mate, what was apart from the sort of lack of operational opportunities and deployments and that, what was one of the clinches that it was like time to get out and do something else?
Yeah, great question. So before I made up my mind that I was leaving defense, I actually wanted to core transfer. I was going to have a go and put my red shorts on and actually become a PTI. That was I got thrown on a CFL course, and I thought, this seems all right. I like training, get to train others. That should be fun. The core transfer didn't go through. I could only speculate it was just due to the manning at the time. 8-9 didn't quite have the numbers, so they didn't let me go. And at that point, I was like, that's kind of it for me. I'm not getting any fulfillment out of this role. And it really begs the question, when we're not operational, how do you keep the diggers motivated? Like, how do you keep the young guys keen? And I think that's, one of the areas where defense has ran into challenges with retention and things of that nature.
Yep. Mate, how many cadence heaves can you still do?
Still do? Yeah, great question. Look, it's been a while since I've given a go the cadence heaves, so I'd have to put that one to the test.
Mate, I wouldn't want to do them in public at the moment. I'll just say that. Okay, so tell us about VetComp. What does VetComp do? And I want to come back and talk about the journey about how VetComp started.
Yeah, sure. So VetComp specializes in DVA advocacy, primarily support with DVA claims. That's the short one-liner of VetComp, but we're also focused on holistic support. Now, one of the initiatives which we've actually recently launched is post-claims support. Obviously, as a veteran myself, I've been through the claims process, and a lot of the time, DVA is quite generous, contrary to what the public perception might be and what was found in the DVA forums and the Facebook pages. Now, with that generosity, it doesn't equate to fixing symptoms, curing conditions, and being able to move on with life. And one of the barriers which a lot of our guys are facing once they complete the claims process, if they get approved conditions, they obviously go on their white card. If they get a gold card, fantastic. But it's about access. What providers are actually taking the white and gold card and are able to build DVA? So that's a big push, is the post-claim support initiative. And that's something which we're really focused on at the moment.
Man, one of the things that I found, so number one is, I'll make two comments about paid advocacy and DVA. So the first one with paid advocacy is, I'm a believer in it because I believe that people should have choice. I know there's a lot of advocacy services out there. There's a lot of veteran-owned ones, and we're supportive of all of those businesses within the VBC. So people should have choice. You want to go to the RSL and use an advocate? Good luck. You want to go to a paid person and use an advocate? Good luck. It's up to you. Horses for courses, you're all different. You're all offer different things, but ultimately, I think my only one thing would be is to try and look for a veteran-owned service. Because that's, well, I'm a single issue zealot and I just plug veteran-owned for anything. But particularly in this place, it's lived experience. My second comment on DVA is, I am a massive DVA fan. I don't believe the organization is perfect, but nothing in this world is perfect. And I'm absolutely glass is 3/4 half full when I look at DVA. I think that we are very lucky as a military community to have the legacy of DVA, which has been around in this country for 100 odd years, or ever since World War One, whatever the framework of it is that led to DVA. And I think that we should be fortunate to look at the support that we get when other people look at, just in the news recently, we had those couple of coppers unfortunately killed in Victoria last week. Now, coppers and ambos and fireys don't have a DVA kind of framework. So that's just my sort of broad statement across them two, mate. Supportive of both. Right. So I just want to come back and talk about getting out and that entrepreneurial itch. I'm always interested in the pathways into business and how people have that entrepreneurial itch or spark that needs to ignite. Were you always someone who was passionate about starting a business, or did you fall into this? So what's the story about coming from transition into starting VetComp? How did that even start?
Yeah, great question. And what I think was, I was under the illusion that having your own business meant all this spare time and all this freedom. Obviously, you don't get much of that when you're in defense. Did get a rude shock, right? When you run your own business, you don't have a boss. But what we did find is that when you have 1,000 clients, they technically all become your boss. So you have 1,000 bosses, right? So that was a shock for us. But that was the motivation to get out of the fence, is to forge my own path and really find something which I'm passionate about. And at the time, defense just wasn't scratching that itch. As we discussed earlier, there weren't any operations. There was a lot of breezeway time, a lot of emptying your kit, sweeping the cages, DP1 checks, and
DP1 checks.
I don't miss that stuff. But there's certainly elements I do miss, the camaraderie. But fortunately enough, with the work I do now, I still get to stay connected to the veteran community.
Man, the military was the best job I ever had. Mates and hanging out, and like I said, going to the gym and doing all of that. But for me, business was just always my pathway. You mentioned, I'll almost call them like the golden handcuffs, in terms of the way that business can bind you to itself. And one of the things I'm always interested into is this elevation from, you're starting a gig until you start your first business and you become financially viable and you hit this sort of level of self-employment. It's just enough for you to pay your own bills. Then things start growing. You think things start moving. Then we all of a sudden get a few team members. And then almost instead of the freedom, it actually is the opposite. Sometimes it's easy to go get a job. How did you start this thing by yourself? You got a business partner? How did it kick off?
Yeah, so it was myself and my co-founder Tyson. So we actually met through defense. We were both posted at 8-9 together. Interestingly enough, the time which we were in service, we didn't interact much. For whatever reason, we found each other post-separation, and we caught up for a coffee one time, and we sort of were both going through the claims process. And then once we saw the other end of it, we thought, this can certainly be optimized. There's a lot of barriers in place. There's a lot of challenges which we face firsthand. And what was the real catalyst for us and allowing us to really understand the process was the first team member we brought on was actually a DVA delegate, which gave us all that insight into the DVA processes.
Yep. With who's your co-founder again?
Tyson Head.
Mate, good to give him a shout out. And were you in the
Yeah, you'll
same
see him on
company?
the website. Yep.
Were you in the same company or at 8-9?
Yeah, we actually were. So we were in the same company, but like I said earlier, it was strange. We didn't talk much in service, and then for whatever reason, we caught up for a coffee after, and then it's turned into what it's turned into now.
It's like those not talking to them 5 platoon guys, mate.
Uh,
Hey, well, one of the things that I like, just a quick shout out as well. One of the the most empowering things for me is, and I'm going to shout out my business partner, Matt Mosley, who's a Dunterin classmate. And Matt like literally never listens to this. The last thing he would want to do is listen to my voice voluntarily in his spare time. But for me, having a co-founder, military brethren as well, has just been a massive driver of success for me personally. And I literally would not have been able to be successful without him. So bit of love for you there, Mose. For anyone, I would never tell him to his face. But he'll never listen to this. So
he's not going to listen, right? So
he'll never listen, mate. So it's all good. So when you went through your DVA claim process, did you use a paid advocate, or what was your experience?
Yeah, so this was, again, part of the sort of ignition which propelled us to get into what we were doing. So I initially engaged with the RSL, and what I want to prefix all of this with is the RSL is a fantastic organization, and especially the volunteers there, right?
Absolutely.
Now, there's some instances where the advocates who are at the RSL are actually funded by BEST grants, so they do get some funding. It's from the government. It's very minimal. I tried to engage with the RSL. They were backed up. They didn't have any availability. In addition to that, it was hard to find anybody who I could consider relatable. And that's just simply due to the age demographic, right? So I engaged a paid advocate. A lot of my friends were using them at the time. And that system, while it was better, it certainly had its flaws. So that was one of the reasons why Tyson and I wanted to set the standard in the space, because we tried the RSL route, that was unsuccessful. And then we also tried the paid advocacy route, and that still wasn't to par. So we knew that there was certainly demand and that there was a lot of innovation to be had in the space.
Yeah, so my experience was similar. I started talking to an RSL DVA advocate just as I was transitioning. And whilst he was a lovely gentleman and a volunteer, he was very, very senior. And I found it difficult just to resonate or talk with him. And there's no fault, my fault, not his, but I just didn't get that momentum. I was lucky to find, an amazing volunteer, and I won't talk about other agencies or other volunteers at the moment, but I just want to share something about my DVA experience, which is hopefully, helps others. It's, how do I say this? Now, we all have our good days and we all have our bad days. And in the military, we have this, stiff upper lip, crack on, and we have an ability to overlook some of our vulnerabilities or frailties. And I actually found the DVA process, and I did it about 5 years ago, and it's probably improved massively, to be extremely challenging for my own mental health to reflect on my vulnerabilities. But I needed to do that to be able to share my experiences and to be able to have, the advocate understand what was the right process for me. But one of the things that I feel really needs to be nurtured or cared for is the person whilst they go through that process, because it is extremely, I guess that it makes you feel very vulnerable to go back and relive and to not be tough and to expose yourself. But you need to do that to get the right outcomes from the process.
Yeah, certainly. And that's a huge barrier which we see. So we can kind of summarize that to the stoic sort of mantra within defense, shut up and put your pack on, right? But that comes at a cost, and that cost is normally underreporting. So underreporting can affect the available evidence, which makes it very hard to get the claim approved. But it can also extend to the actual assessments themselves. So let's assume that the claim did get approved, and then it's time to conduct the impairment assessment. Now, for those who aren't familiar, the impairment assessment is where essentially all the compensation and points will be calculated after initial liability is admitted. But if you go into that appointment and you underreport your symptoms or you underreport your impairments, you're only shortchanging yourself and you're not actually getting the compensation which you're entitled to.
Yeah. It's not like, and you should never ever fraud or over report or make shit up, basically.
No.
But at the same time, if it's real and legit, then you should be declaring it, because it's just reality about your life and your experience. I think one of the other tough things as well, again, talking my experience, is I'm just a loggy. You know what I mean? I'm not an infantryman. I spent most of my time, in barracks, and which is absolutely true. And feeling this sort of worthiness to other people, like other people did it tougher, other people went through more, but that doesn't really matter because it's only about your experience, and this is about you and your world and your family and your life. So comparing yourself to others, if anything, it's not like we claim credibility or we're trying to claim like glory or anything like that we don't deserve. But this is a private moment between you and yourself and the process. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, it makes perfect sense. And we see it firsthand here. So comparison throughout the claims process can be very, very dangerous. And it works both ways, right? So there's the comparison of, for instance, I never deployed, therefore I shouldn't be entitled to it, right? That's one sort of ideology. And then the other end is, my friend, my mate, he's more effed up than I am. Oh, correction, I'm more effed up than he is, so therefore I should get more. But what we need to understand is you're not privy to their personal experiences and you're not privy to the medical investigations which they have conducted, right?
Yeah.
And frankly, a lot of the compensation when it comes to DVA claims is derived from a mental health claim. And these non-physical conditions, which are mental health, they're not easily observable, right? So unless you really know what your mate is going through and you've seen the assessments, comparing your impairments at face value is a very dangerous game to play.
Man, and we're all humans. We're all fucked up in one way or the other. That's all. There's no military doesn't own this.
No, that's right.
This is just normal life for most of us, mate. One of the things I just want to again share just before we crack on and get back into VetComp is just looking after the I guess, would you call it self-manifestation of going through these processes of being vulnerable and having that persist after the process. Again, from coming to this point of having stiff upper lip, stoic, crack on, diving into the valley of exposure and vulnerability to go through the process, it's important that you understand the process and you do things for the process sake and get yourself back out of the valley, crack on again, get that stiff upper lip back, and don't just stay in this hole of manifestation that sometimes you need to get through whilst you're going through that vulnerable process.
Yep, certainly. I couldn't agree with you more, Pete. And it's a sad reality, and we've seen it a lot. Despite the outcome of their claim, despite all the coverage from DVA, there's a persistence to, or rather a reluctancy to take any ownership in the situation. Yeah. Now, I want to be careful because there's certainly, there's no blame to be diverted to the veteran here, but there is an onus on the individual to also help themselves, right? Absolutely. And the downside of all the support is it doesn't really create an onus to do better. One of the things which I see are guys medically separate, right? Unfortunate, that sucks. A lot of the time they end up on a Class A CSC pension, which is great coverage. It's great support. But they're then not motivated to re-engage with the community. They're then not motivated to return to the workforce. And I've seen this happen to guys who are 21, 22 years old with a whole life ahead of them.
This is dangerous.
This is dangerous. Very dangerous.
I hate to use the term, but it's almost like defense welfare. And it's almost too much, but not enough. And what I mean by that is, and again, I don't have a Class A or whatever, but and I don't really know how it works or what it is, but from what I know, it's enough money to look after yourself, but it's not enough money to be sort of aspirational. It's sort of sitting there in some kind of middle class land that
Mhm.
keeps you comfortable, but it doesn't. It's not enough that you're going to excel in life, nor should it be. It's not its job to be.
Yeah.
Um, and there's this sort of lack of what's next. And for me, I think one of the biggest risks of that is sitting in the broken soldier sailor airman mentality, which you've had to manifest to go through the DVA process. And it has
Mhm.
been somewhat fulfilled by the compensation or pension claim. But that's what I talk about, the valley going down and coming back up again.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck in the bottom of that valley and sit in that manifestation of being broken. Fucking crack on and start doing something.
Yeah. And it all seems to happen at once, right? So a lot of the times, veterans, they'll get injured, they'll develop a condition, whatever it might be. And then oftentimes that will lead to a transition out of defense.
Yeah.
So you have these injuries and conditions which are affecting their well-being and capacity. But in addition to that, there's a huge loss of identity when people transfer out of service,
Yeah, absolutely.
especially for people who have served for decades, or, it becomes part of their core identity. I'm a soldier, right? And when
Yeah.
that's stripped away, and it's not, especially when it's not a voluntary separation and it is stripped away, massive loss of identity. Where do I go to next?
Mate, it's funny that. And it's why I probably still do this veteran business community stuff now, probably, what am I, 2025? We're probably looking at 8 years since I've left the military. It was such an important, amazing part of my life. And I guess I am clinging to it, but I'm clinging to it, not able to serve, but I just clinging to it by being associated with the amazing people that have also been a part of it. And this is why I now dedicate my life to the veteran business community, because I just really want to be able to share and see others who served thrive. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Mate, way too much about me. We need to go back over to you. Um, Tell us about VetComp. Who's in your team? Um, what's the business model?
Yeah, cool. Great questions. So let's start with the team. We've got a very eclectic team. If you looked at us all individually, it wouldn't quite make sense that we're all together. But the benefit of that is obviously we're incredibly diverse and we bring in a whole range of skill sets. So a lot of our team is comprised of veterans. So
Mm-hmm.
that's obviously really important, to stay true to the brand. And then we've got specialists from different fields. So for instance, we've got people who have worked at DVA medical centers. We've got people who
Yep.
used to work at DVA, and we've got people who have worked in the allied health, psychology backgrounds, legal backgrounds, and we sort of all pull that collective knowledge together, ideally to get outcomes for the veterans. Now, how the model works is veterans will engage us. It's a no-win, no-fee model. At the end of it, if the claim is successful, there's a percentage fee charged. If our team gets you nothing, you literally pay us nothing. And I'll caveat all of that with anybody who engages us, if they haven't tried the RSL or they haven't done it themselves, we'll always make these options known to the veteran, right? Saying that, probably 30% of the guys we look after have already tried to engage the RSL. And like I said earlier, hats off to them. Fantastic work for volunteering.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
when somebody's doing a job for free, how is that person then meant to be held accountable, right? That's a big barrier there. And when someone's volunteering, the work schedule is typically 2 to 3 days at the RSL. Our team is here full time, Monday to Friday in the office, and you can come in and see us. We're only in Toowong, so just around the corner from Brisbane City. So we get a lot of guys coming in person, and they appreciate that too.
Yeah. Are you able to support people digitally or people across the country or around the world, no matter where they are?
Yeah, nationwide. Some challenges, if it's international, it can be done. Those challenges fall on the department, just in terms of how the medical investigations need to be conducted, if they're
Yeah,
conducted
yeah.
overseas, things like that. But we have
Yeah.
done it in the past, and it is achievable.
Yeah. You're still going to go see a doc and get things verified and confirmed and all of that kind of stuff. Um,
Exactly.
let's run a few scenarios. When is the best time to look at this? Should you be doing this when you are in service, as you're transitioning out of service? Or is it the kind of saying like, when is the best time to plant a tree? Well, it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, closer to the latter. Now, there's a couple of reasons it works this way. So we'll start from the initial liability stage, which means getting the actual claim approved.
Yep.
So let's assume it's an injury. If an injury happens, the sooner you can provide the evidence and sooner you can capture that evidence, the easier it's going to be for the claim to get approved because the evidence is readily available. Okay. That's one thing. So when something happens, ideally you should get the claim in as soon as possible. So because the evidence will be readily available.
Hang on, so get the claim in. So that means actually filling out the initial, the IIL, whatever it is, whatever. And again, long time since the military, your 80049 or your incident report or whatever that number was, hopefully you've done them at the time of the incident. And then you're suggesting that even if you're still serving, that you can put in that initial liability then, not long after that.
Yeah, most certainly. So probably the majority of the veterans we look after are actually still serving.
Yeah, right. I to be honest, I had no idea about that. What was that form called again? Was it an 80049 or something like that?
I'm not sure if you're referencing the injury and disease sheet, or are you sort of referencing more like a Sentinel report here?
No, it was whatever form you filled out when you had an accident, like if you did your knee or something like that, an incident report.
Through defense?
Yeah. What was that called again?
I think that's all tracked now on Sentinel.
Yeah, Sentinel. Yeah, mate. Oh, back when I did that, you put in a bit of paper through your 2IC or something. But so I didn't realize that even at that time you could be probably loading up your liability and sort of just having them recognized for later. Is that right?
Yep, most certainly. And another really good reason to actually get started on the process sooner rather than later is the compensation is age adjusted. So what that means is if somebody progresses a claim for permanent impairment, so the claim gets approved, we're now seeking compensation. If they did that, let's say when they're 50 compared to if they were 20, the 20-year-old is going to get significantly more compensation because of the age adjustment. Simply put, the way DVA see it is you've got less time to live with the impairment, so therefore we're going to pay you less. That's in a nutshell the view DVA take on it.
Okay, yep. What if you've, on the point of, so is putting in the liability separate while if you're serving to receiving the compensation while you're serving, or does that have to come after you get out, or can it come whilst you're serving?
You can do them both at the same time, as in you can do them both while you're in service. Yep. And that's a big misconception which people have is people assume that I can't put a claim in while I'm serving. And how we actually facilitate this, because we understand that sometimes getting support through the ADF healthcare system can come with its challenges. And what can be arranged is external medical investigations separate to defense.
Yep.
So we can gather the reports, we can gather the medical evidence external to defense, and then that's been submitted to DVA. From there, initial liability is determined. So the claim is approved, claim is rejected. If it's rejected, you can obviously take that to appeals, and that's another whole topic there. If the claim has been approved, you can then decide if you want to take it to permanent impairment. Now, in order for a condition to actually recover compensation, it needs to be considered permanent, hence the name permanent impairment. But in addition to that, the condition also needs to be considered stable. Now, this creates a little bit of confusion. Stable, to put simply, really just means the condition is unlikely to improve or get better.
Yep. Okay, so you're stuck with it.
Pretty much. And that your condition, it's not constantly up and down, right? So then DVA can apportion the degree of impairment appropriately.
Because this is stability is an important part here. That the condition is now the way it is, for better or worse.
Exactly. And the things DVA will be looking for there is most of the time treatment which has been trialed. So dependent on the condition, this is obviously going to vary. If it's a mental health condition, DVA will probably want to see some attempt of, psychology, medication in some instances, psychiatry, things of that nature. If it's a physical condition, this obviously varies. You could be looking at things like physiotherapy, medication, surgery in some instances, and any other sort of allied health, so like chiro as well, maybe.
Mate, for anyone out there, particularly the senior NCOs of the world who are going, what are you talking about 80049? That's actually the vehicle authorization form, not the accident form. I just had to do a quick Google on the side there. So shout out there, to my, being a twit myself. Hey, what about if you've transitioned or you're well transitioned? What's the process for you like, if, I did my knee in Kapuka in 82, and I didn't fill the form out. How does it work for these guys and girls?
Yeah, well, that does pose some unique challenges, particularly with that example. So if you sustained an injury in 82, you would actually fall under a previous set of legislation, which is
Yep.
soon all to be consolidated under one legislation,
Yep.
frankly called MERCA 2.0. Now,
Yep.
again, if you're not familiar with that sort of stuff, don't worry about it. Apart from the fact that soon everybody is going to be assessed under the same. But to come full circle on your question in relation to transition, there's no, like, you can submit a claim for any condition, despite how long it's been, but there are limitations within the SOPs, which is
Yep.
DVA's legislative instrument, in which some conditions can't actually be claimed. So nothing's going to stop you from submitting the claim, but if time has passed, it can prove more challenging to get approved.
Mate, this is where, for me, you get what you pay for comes into it,
Yeah,
because whether it be Durka or Merca or whatever the one previous was, when it
VA, yeah.
comes to it, mate, even if look, I was lucky to go through Duntroon and be an officer, so I had a decent understanding of army administration and military process and how it works. I can only feel for the diggers and sailors and airmen of the world who don't get that kind of exposure to the systems. And now they're trying to have to unpack the difference between three different sets of legislation and this SOP and what these points mean and how that converts into the,
Mm-hmm.
your compensation points. Like, mate, it's very confusing.
Yeah, it can be, right. And we try and make the process as stress free and as easy as possible. Now, the only requirement which we put on our veterans is just turn up to your appointments. That's honestly
Yeah.
all. We'll handle everything else. We'll even schedule your appointments. We'll get you connected with providers. We'll liaise with DVA on your behalf. We'll confirm that DVA's decisions and DVA's determinations are accurate. There's been
Yep.
countless times where we've needed to review it or challenge a delegate's determination. And fortunately enough, in some instances, we've got them overturned. And, having the right advocate, I want to be careful here because there's sort of a sentiment within the community that, an advocate isn't going to change the outcome of your claim. And while that might be tangibly correct, like we can't change DVA's legislation or policy, a qualified and a good advocate can identify new claims. And what I mean by that is we have so many veterans come to us and they say, I don't know what I can claim for. I've had back pain for 10 years. Is this a claim? Or I don't know if it is. Well, the answer to
Yeah.
that is we need three things to get a claim. We need a diagnosis. Okay. So if it was a back condition, we'd ideally want an MRI. If that came
Yep.
back with a diagnosis, we've ticked one box. The second box we're looking for is a link to service. So how is it service related? Let's say with this veteran, he's got the back condition, he's been a grunt for 10 years. So this would be a weight bearing sort of contention in relation to service.
Yep.
And the third thing with that is an SOP factor. So that's actually meeting DVA's legislative requirements. And it's unfortunate because just because it happened in service doesn't mean the claim is going to get approved. So having
Yeah.
the right advocate on your side can actually identify those claims which are likely to get approved, and we can help push them through.
Mate, it's an interesting space. Where do you see this space moving from an industry perspective?
Look, there's definitely a demand for paid professional commercial advocacy.
Yep.
And if there wasn't, there wouldn't be any advocacy groups in business, right?
Yeah.
So people are transitioning from the ESOs and from the RSL. And from the feedback I'm getting from the people who are coming from the RSL is in some instances, and not all the case, but seemingly a lot of the times they're out of touch. Sometimes they're not incredibly relatable. And when it comes to correspondence, a lot of the time it's very minimal. And what I mean by that is to my earlier point, how I said working part time, maybe they're 2 days a week. Our team's here every day of a week. So if let's say an RSL advocate is working Tuesdays and Thursdays and DVA send a report on Friday, well, the earliest the veterans getting that report is Tuesday. And that's the earliest if it's top of priority. Whereas if we get it on Friday, you're getting it on Friday as well. So we can't make DVA go quicker, but we can go quicker and get shit back to DVA faster for you, which in turn reduces the time frame.
And you mentioned it earlier. I think one of the key points to, again, coming back to that simple statement, you get what you pay for, is you get accountability. You get accountability in terms of you are paying for something, so you should demand excellent service.
Yeah.
And it's one thing, I was talking to a mate of mine, Carl Schwantes, who's a former artillery officer who owns, he actually owns a company called Xenox Diamonds, downtown Brisbane. Really, really clever customer oriented guy. And one of the things with business, if you deliver excellent service to somebody, well, that is exactly what they're paying for. Yeah. They're not paying to get, a shit outcome. They're paying to get what they paid for, which is quality and service. So from a business perspective, we shouldn't look at doing a great job as being amazing. A great job is what people pay for, and it's, and this is why people should be able to have the choice for paid advocacy. And when you're choosing, your advocacy company, number one, choose veteran owned, but shop around and look for the people who have the values and the runs on the board.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic take, Pete. And coming back to service and, being customer orientated, that's so core to what we do here. Our business was built off word of mouth. So when we first started, we maybe put close to $1,000 on meta ads because we needed to get the name out there. Yep. And if you haven't ran meta ads before, that's fuck all spending on budget. Okay. Yep. We got our first maybe 3-4 clients from that. That was fantastic. And then from there, the word of mouth just compounded. Word of mouth is parasitical. And what I see a lot of businesses do, not just in the veteran space, but they'll heavily index on marketing, advertising, like a sales team, which is all fantastic in business. But if you were to pour those resources into your service, you could be acquiring new leads at no cost because your quality of service has increased and they're telling their friends via word of mouth.
Oh, dude, low cost, no cost fees. And, this is all about understanding. Now we're talking a bit of business shop, mate. This is what I love. Okay, let's go back to, I just want to unpack a couple of things here and just talk a bit of shop first. Meta ads, did you do it yourself or get someone to do it for you?
Yeah, so that's something we tried to learn ourselves. And we're now outsourcing it. So we've recently just,
it's just like your advocacy claim, mate. Yeah, I can do this. Can't be too hard.
Yeah, I thought, look, we'd give it a go ourselves. At the time, we didn't really have the budget to engage an agency. And one of our restraints for such a long time was our capacity to actually onboard new veterans. So we're very diligent with who we bring into the team, and we're very thorough, and we do a lot of vetting. And in terms of the interviews, they're very straightforward. And what I mean by that is we make it very clear the expectations here. And if the expectations aren't met, people get let go, okay? But fortunately enough, we've onboarded some new staff, which means we've been in a position where we can actually turn the ads back on. But that word of mouth is still providing us most of our work.
I mean, how are you managing, your demand versus supply as a business owner? Like where are you sitting at the moment in your business? More than you can handle, or you need more work?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's really situational. So as of right now, we've just onboarded 2 new advocates. So maybe for the next 3 months, we'll have quite a considerable amount of capacity, but that will fill up quickly. And my whole philosophy when it comes to managing that demand is manage the demand, but not at the cost of a service, right? So if we get to a point where the service is suffering because we're servicing too many veterans and the quality dips, well, that's an indicator to stop onboarding veterans because we need to maintain our service quality.
How are you finding these lessons learned as a business owner and managing that, the peaks and the troughs? Because ultimately this is now becoming down to forecast and cash flow and risk. How are you finding this sort of pull and, this accordion way that business moves and evolves?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a new experience coming from Defence Force and then, like I said earlier, forging our own path and trying to make a difference. So it's been, there's been a lot of stressful moments. And I think one thing which is true to us is if we just keep delivering a quality and consistent service, people are still going to tell their friends about us. And as you know, the veteran community speaks and word of mouth itself is parasitical, right? So we're not really concerned from a onboarding perspective. Our only concern is a capacity perspective, right? And so we want to make sure we have the right team who's equipped.
What about your headquarters? How do you set up? What job do you do versus what Tyson does?
Yeah, so Tyson's the policy DVA nerd. He's our head advocate. So if you have specific DVA questions, he's certainly the man to ask. I tend to handle the
gives
operations.
Me a shiver. It's giving me a shiver just thinking about that job, mate.
Poor Tyson, right? I tend to handle all the operations, very customer focused. So I was heavily involved in the onboarding stage. We've
Yep.
recently just hired an onboarding manager. Prior to that, I was doing all the onboarding. Um, Customer service, service experience, delivery of service is really where my head is at,
Yep.
and making sure we're making the right strategic moves moving forward.
Are you co-CEOs or is one the boss or not the boss?
Yeah, so we sort of delegate in terms of tasks. So if it falls into the DVA claims kind of space, if it's a
Mhm.
policy decision about like DVA, that falls on Tyson. In terms of direction of the company, what service looks like, what additional services will be included. It's everything is collaborative between Tyson and I, but I certainly steer the ship in the direction and sort of forecasting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know Atlassian have got co-CEOs and co-founders, and so they seem to be doing all right. So it's not my position to do it. But one of the things that I've really noticed and can self-reflect is Matt is a far better boss than I am, and I'm actually quite comfortable. Now I've done it in a couple of my companies now. Is in one of my businesses called Offshore Talent, we've got a couple hundred staff over there. When I hired a CEO for that company, someone who was far more experienced and far more cleverer than I was, I actually worked for him, for about 6 months
Yeah.
because like he's just way smarter. But I was able to exit that business and just let him run it. But one of the things I'm definitely like one of these kind of visionaries, great ideas. I can come up with a new idea every day for a business, but I am shit at execution. And that's where Matty was really a game changer or even lifesaver for me. Is he's a master at that. So for me, we are very much comfortable sitting in our lanes. And Matt and I often joke, all I've got to do is come up with one good idea a month, and it'll pay for it. The rest of the time, he'll just say, "Nah, Pete, that's done. We're not doing that."
Yeah.
So, and just having that, what's your feeling on or advice for people that are going solopreneur versus having that business partner?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think they both come with a list of pros and cons.
Yep.
So let's start with the business partner out. The business partner out, you want to make sure you're getting in business with the right people, first of all.
Mm.
Okay. And I think it's important to delineate clear tasks between the two of you, because if it ever comes to a stalemate and nobody has direction of either kind of area, who makes the final decision? It can create
Yeah.
a lot of clashing. So iron that out first. If you're going on your own, obviously you have the autonomy to make all the decisions, but you don't have that sounding board, you don't have that support. Yes, you might get more equity, and if it goes great, fantastic, you're 100% equity owner, great for
Yeah.
you. So it really depends. I think if you're going into business and you're going in with a business partner, make sure that you have clear roles and responsibilities, and make sure that there's someone you can trust.
Yeah. Well, my position on that, and this is just a reflection of my personal nature and personal strengths and weaknesses, is I would prefer to have half of one than keep all of nothing to myself. Because
Yeah.
in reality, if I tried to do it by myself, it probably wouldn't even exist.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
you know, like I said, as the ideas guy, I can come up with all the ideas, but in reality, one of my biggest shifts when it came into business, I used to think ideas were really valuable and really precious. Um, and then someone said, man, ideas are only worth 5%. Execution is worth 95%. Someone who's going to breathe life into it and actually make it happen. Mate, as we approach to wrap, I just want to talk about three things. Systemize, automate, delegate, right? The three pillars that I always use to, grow and successfully scale businesses. How have you systemized with process? How have you automated with platforms? And how do you manage delegation with people?
Yeah, sure. So let's start with systems. One thing I'm big on, and one thing I actually took from the fence, is there is a right way to do everything, right?
Yep.
So when you're at Kapuka, your socks need to be X amount of centimeters apart. When you
Yeah.
stand at attention, you need to stand in this particular way. It's the same with every sort of checkpoint and every sort of every stage of the claims process, right? So DVA have their own systems and their own key checkpoints. That's obviously
Yep.
important for our team to understand. But we've also developed an internal framework with our own internal checkpoints. So one of the biggest things, and one thing I drill into our team, is an in-depth discovery. Because if we don't do an in-depth discovery, we don't uncover all of the potential claims, which means the veteran is, worse off in that case. And we follow very strict and very coherent frameworks, which have been developed by Tyson and I, and we continually iterate. And it's just about finding those 1% improvements and just actually executing on them. So that's in terms of systems. My philosophy.
I'll just hold you there on systems in one sec because I just want to share something. Process, I love it because process. What you mentioned there about the discovery is really important for any business, no matter who or what they are. And I call it the golden thread, right? And the golden thread is all about you must ask the right question at the earliest possible moment, at the earliest, most appropriate moment, right? We want to stack all of these questions or this discovery as early as possible because it's going to be game changing in the way that you leverage further down the track. What you don't want to have to do is get 4 or 5 steps into the process and go, oh shit, I forgot to ask that before. And as a business owner, every time you make that mistake, and you will make that mistake over and over and over and over, you've got to be able to embed that learning into that golden thread and think, shit, ask it early next time. And that's for you. That's what that discovery process is all about. So Matt, our second or third business was called Trust the Process. So we preach this shit, man. Process. And for me, the definition of process is capture excellence and repeat. Sorry, mate, little tangent. Let's go. That's systemized. Let's go to automate. How are you using tech?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because obviously there's so many ways to automate now, right?
Yeah.
In terms of what we're doing, one of the big changes was incorporating a robust CRM, and then we also worked with an automation group who set up a lot of things through Zapier. Which,
Excellent.
For those who aren't familiar, I don't even completely understand Zapier. That's why we paid someone to do it. But it can automate a lot of sort of manual tasks, and it can free up a lot of time.
Yeah.
So a lot of administrative stuff we try and automate. Anything which, is, I don't think you can really automate client-facing stuff. So all the emails, all the calls, obviously they're done manually. But when it comes to for example, when a veteran completes their appointment, we can automate it so that we have an indicator that their appointment is complete, and then we know to chase up DVA and say, hurry up and make a determination.
What CRM are you using?
We're using Monday at the moment.
Cool. Again, excellent platform, excellent for process management, and keeping things accountable. My thoughts, just for picking up that Zapier bit, when we're talking about automation, there's a few things that we can automate. We can automate things that get done. So Zapier I'll go back a step. When we're talking about automation, we can automate an action that gets completed. We can automate a message to be sent, and we can automate, a reminder for something else to happen later. Now, a lot of software platforms plug into each other, just like putting something into the PowerPoint, a kettle into the PowerPoint. So you might have Monday and Xero, for example, and you can create an integration or an automation for them to do. If something happens on Monday, the exact opposite thing happens on Xero. Where Zapier sits in is when that thing doesn't plug together properly and you need to put an extension cord in. Zapier is that extension cord between those two elements. And Zapier can sometimes open a whole other set of opportunities to push and pull data. Sometimes on a native integration, we might just have data goes one way, or we can use Zapier for the data to move both ways. But this is really powerful. And one of the things I just want to pick up and enforce, don't get overcomplicated or don't try and be over tricky with your automations or your workflows. And because people will see through it, you can't automate support, customer service, and help. You can automate administration and process and actions in the back end, but really don't try and automate people. Right. Systemize, automate, delegate. Tell us about your team and how your structure works.
Yeah, sure. So Tyson, for the most part, oversees everything the advocates do.
Yep.
before any claims are submitted, before any feedback to DVA, if we need to make like escalate to appeals or anything like that, because he's our senior advocate. I'm in charge of all the hiring, firing as well. And that's kind of the split between Tyson and I. So if in some capacity, I guess I'm in a HR role. Tyson's
Yep.
in a manager supervising role. And then
Yep.
from there, we have the advocates. In an accessory to the advocates, we have our onboarding department, which department is a generous term. It's Darcy, who's from the Navy. He's our department at the moment. But we also have our admin team, which is Hope. She's fantastic. She handles all the back end stuff, which can't be automated. Like you said, Pete, a lot of the back end stuff can be. But particularly when a veteran has a query or something like that, she'll be the one to respond. In addition to that, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but all of our team here are mental health first aid trained, and we have an internal psychologist. So obviously when you go through the claims process, like you said, Pete, you kind of fall into the valley, you open up those vulnerabilities, and sometimes you're rehashing old wounds. That can open up a lot of problems, and we understand that. So that's why all of our team here are mental health first aid trained. And if we see that there's a crisis moment, we then refer internally first to our psychologist if they wish. And then if it requires further intervention, it's external referrals from there.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, mate, what's next, for you, and what's next for VetComp?
Yeah, look, what's next? I think we're really big on growing our team and servicing as many veterans as we can. I think we want to really stick true to our mission, and that's just to make the DVA claims process as simple, as coherent, and as stress-free as possible, so we can remove those barriers so the guys can actually get what they're entitled to. So from here, it's growth, to be concise. And what that looks like specifically is onboarding new team members, training them up, and making sure that they have an invested interest on the direction of the company as well.
Brilliant, mate. Well, I am just a passionate, vehement believer in veteran enterprise. I just love the fact that veterans hire veterans. How many veterans you got on your team?
We just went through a bit of rehiring, but we've got 4 at the moment.
Hey, brilliant. This is a really, powerful and passionate space that, we're sitting in here, because I just so much believe that, enterprise creates aspiration, it creates opportunity. And I really strongly believe that as part of the veteran community, one of the best things that we can do to really break this broken soldier, sailor, airman mentality is to be a lighthouse. And for us as veteran business owners is to really put ourselves in front of others. You see it, you can be it. So we all have our moments. We all have our frailties where none of us are perfect, but, collectively, it is, I feel, our collective responsibility to, just to remember the people that we served with, and everybody's got an individual circumstance. And just to reinforce something we've talked about before, comparisons are pointless, because it's your journey, your life, and ultimately you'll get what you pay for. So shout out to the RSL and all the other volunteers out there that do this thing gratuitously, and they do it to the best of their ability. But also shout out to the people putting their reputations and and the money on the line by creating these businesses and creating great opportunities. So, mate, keep up the good work.
Appreciate it, Pete. And I think if I can just leave everybody with this, whether you engage with the RSL, whether you do it yourself, whether you use a commercial advocacy service, the most important thing is to get it done. You're not doing yourself any favors by delaying it. Okay. So if you've sustained an injury, if you think you've even sustained an injury, reach out to someone, get the help, and get it squared away, guys.
Right. That's what it's about. So you can reach Zach and the team at vetcomp.com.au. Well, as always, we have the details in the show notes, and how to get in touch with the team. Mate, I just love veterans in business, mate. So congratulations on being brave. Congratulations for being, as they say, the man in the arena. There's plenty of people out there in the bleachers that'll have plenty to criticize and talk about what other people do. But ultimately, as business owners, we're the ones that are stepping into the arena. We're the ones that are giving it a crack. And for better or worse, here we are.
That's it, right? Appreciate you for having us on, Pete. It's been great.
Yeah. Champion, mate. Thank you. if you've ever served and you haven't done DVA, then just go speak to somebody. Speak to RSL. Go speak to Zach and the team at VetComp. Go find somebody to talk to. It's your journey, your individual experience that matters here. If you're serving or you're not serving and you're passionate about business, well, the whole point of the veteran business community is to support you have a profitable and resilient business. What you'll find here at VBC, just like Zach, is people who have been in uniform with a shared experience that are passionate about business. Now, we don't know it all. I don't know it all. It's a place where everybody can learn and share. So get involved with the veteran business community, veteranbc.com. And that's enough for today. Zach, thank you, mate. I appreciate it.
Cheers, Pete. Thanks, mate.
Right, let's call it a wrap there. My name's Pete Liston, Military Mindset for Business podcast. Out.